blood in the water. That's what Hank Lawson saw when he rode past Cotton Creek that evening. And he knew right then trouble was coming. The sun was sinking low, turning the desert sky to fire. The land was quiet, except for the soft creak of Dusty's saddle and the wind whistling through dry mesquite. Hank was heading home, thinking only of a warm fire and a stiff shot of whiskey. Then he saw it, a dark stain on the rocks by the creek. Blood. He pulled the reins. Dusty stopped with a low snort. Hank dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel. Something moved in the water. A girl. Young, maybe 16, 17. Her long black hair stuck to her face, wet and tangled. She was clawing at the bank, but her leg, Jesus, it was torn open, bleeding bad. Hank froze. An Apache girl. He knew what that meant. Help her, and the cavalry would call him a traitor. Turn his back, and he might as well shoot her himself. She saw him, eyes wide, like a scared deer. Her lips moved. No words came out, just fear. For a moment, he just stood there. The war years came rushing back, burning cabins, screaming children, blood in the dirt. And behind it all, a memory that cut deeper than any bullet. Lucy, his little girl. The way she looked at him, that night she got sick, reaching for him with tiny, shaking hands. He couldn't save Lucy, but maybe, just maybe. Damn it! Hank tossed his hat aside and stepped into the creek. The water was cold, biting. He grabbed the girl under her arms, pulling her free of the current. She was light as a bird, half-conscious, trembling against him. "Easy now, kid, I gotcha," he muttered. Not that she understood, but maybe she felt it. He hoisted her onto Dusty's back, careful not to jar her wounded leg. Blood soaked through his sleeve. The girl tried to fight, but she was too weak. "Save your strength," Hank said. "Ain't no use dying out here alone." Dusty whinnied, uneasy. The wind carried a sound Hank didn't like. Far off, but getting closer. Horses, lots of them. Hank looked east. The horizon shimmered with heat, but he could swear he saw dust rising. A patrol? Or something worse. He swung up onto Dusty, holding the girl steady with one arm. "Hold on, kid. We're getting out of here." As they rode, Hank's gut churned. This wasn't just some lost traveler. Her necklace caught his eye. A silver pendant shaped like an eagle. He knew that mark. It belonged to the Chiricahua, the fiercest Apache band this side of the Sierra Madre. If she was who he thought she was, he just stuck his neck into a war. The ranch came into view, a lonely stretch of fence, a weathered barn, a cabin beaten down by years of wind and dust. Home. But tonight, it felt like a trap. Hank slid off Dusty, carrying the girl inside. She whimpered when he set her down on the cot. "Hang on, kid," he said, grabbing his old whiskey bottle. "This'll sting like hell." She cried out when he poured it over the wound. He worked fast, cleaning, wrapping, tying it off with a strip of his own shirt. Her breathing slowed. She was safe, for now. But Hank wasn't. He stepped outside, scanning the darkening desert. The wind carried another sound. Hoofbeats. Hank spat into the dust. "Damn it, Lawson," he muttered to himself. "You just invited hell to supper." The fire popped in the old stone hearth. The cabin smelled of smoke, leather, and blood. Hank Lawson knelt beside the cot, studying the girl. Her face was pale under the firelight, lips cracked and dry. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She was alive. For now. Hank wiped his hands on his jeans, the fabric stiff with dried blood. "Kid," he muttered, "you're tougher than you look." The girl didn't answer. She was barely awake, her dark eyes flicking open for only a second before closing again. He moved slow, careful, no sudden moves. He set his Colt .45 on the table, well out of reach. The last thing he wanted was for her to wake up and think he was another enemy. "Don't worry, I ain't gonna hurt you," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like gravel dragged over steel. He grabbed a canteen, tilted her head, and trickled water between her lips. She coughed, but drank. Her eyes fluttered open. For a second they locked on his, full of fire and fear. Hank raised both hands like a peace sign. "See? No fight here, darlin'." She looked at him, confused, whispering something in her language. Hank didn't understand a damn word, but he could tell she was asking where she was. "You're safe," he said, "for now, but we gotta keep it that way." Hank sat back, leaning against the wall. The firelight flickered over his face, highlighting the lines etched by years of sun and war. His eyes drifted to the old wooden rocking chair in the corner. Lucy's chair. The memory hit him like a hammer. His little girl, no more than 7, sitting there with a rag doll, giggling. His wife, Mary, humming a tune while baking cornbread. That was before the fever came, before the coffin turned to silence, before the grave out back. Hank swallowed hard, shaking the memory off like dust. The girl on the cot stirred, snapping him back to now. She wasn't Lucy, but the way she looked at him, for one damn second, it felt like Lucy's eyes. Hank reached for the blanket folded on the trunk, tucking it around the girl. Her skin was cold. He added another log to the fire, watching the flames rise. His mind was running in circles. Who was chasing her? Why was she bleeding like she'd run through hell itself? And why did he feel like the devil himself was about to knock on his door? Then he noticed it. The necklace. A silver eagle, carved with symbols he recognized from old battles. Chiricahua Apache. Not just any Apache. This was the mark of a chief's bloodline. "Hell," he whispered. If this girl was the chief's daughter, that meant 2 things. The Apache would come for her, and so would the U.S. Army. A knock on the door would come sooner or later. Could be the cavalry asking questions Hank didn't want to answer. Could be 30 angry warriors with bows drawn. He rubbed a hand over his face. "What the hell have you gotten yourself into, Lawson?" The girl whispered something again. This time, Hank heard a single word he understood. "Father." Her voice cracked, her eyes glistening. He knew that pain, the kind of pain you carry in your bones. "Don't worry, kid," he muttered, adjusting her bandage. "I'll keep you safe, no matter what's out there." But even as he said it, the night outside the cabin felt heavy, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Somewhere out there, horses were moving. He could feel it in his gut. The question wasn't if they were coming. The question was, who would reach him first? CTA. The night air turned cold. Hank Lawson sat on the porch, a rifle across his lap, watching the horizon. The stars were sharp as broken glass. Dusty, his old chestnut horse, pawed nervously at the dirt, ears twitching. Something was out there. He could feel it. The desert has a way of warning a man who listens. Inside the cabin, the Apache girl, Elara, slept, her breathing shallow but steady. Hank had cleaned the wound again, wrapping it tight. She'd make it if nothing else came knocking. That's when he heard it, faint but clear. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses heading his way. "Damn," Hank muttered under his breath. He grabbed his Colt, checked the cylinder, and leaned against the porch post. The glow of lanterns appeared over the ridge. Cavalry. 5 riders broke through the dark, dust trailing behind them. The lead man wore a blue coat, brass buttons shining under moonlight. U.S. Cavalry, 7th Regiment. Not the kind of company Hank wanted. "Evening, mister," the officer called out, voice smooth but sharp. "Name's Captain Willard. We're tracking an Apache fugitive. You seen anything?" Hank chewed on his answer. Lie or play dumb? Either way, they'd smell trouble if he hesitated. "Just me and my cattle out here," Hank said, his voice flat. "Ain't seen a soul all day." The captain's eyes narrowed. His horse shifted, hooves crunching in the dirt. "You sure? Our scouts picked up blood near Cotton Creek. Trail leads this way." Hank didn't blink. "I saw blood," he said. "Cougar must have got a deer." He tipped his hat low, making it clear he didn't want company. The men glanced toward the cabin. Lantern light glowed from the window. One soldier's hand moved toward his rifle. Inside, Elara stirred, letting out a soft groan. Hank's gut tightened. If they heard her? "You got someone inside?" Captain Willard asked. Hank gave a slow grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Just me. Cabin's old. It creaks like a drunk mule." The captain studied him. A long, heavy silence. Finally, he said, "Mind if we take a look inside?" Hank's jaw clenched. "Yeah, I mind," he said, voice like a loaded gun. "This here's private land. You boys got a warrant?" Willard smirked. "Warrant? Son, this is the frontier. We don't wait for paperwork when Apaches are killing settlers." The word Apaches made Hank's blood run hot. He'd seen what the Army called justice out here. Too many graves in the sand because of men like Willard. "I told ya, there ain't nobody here," Hank said, stepping down from the porch. "Now take your horses and keep riding." The standoff crackled like lightning. 5 rifles, 1 Hank Lawson. Not great odds. But the captain must have seen something in Hank's eyes, something that said he'd fight and take a couple of 'em with him. "Fine," Willard said at last, yanking his reins. "But if we find out you're harboring an Apache, Lawson, you'll swing for it." He turned to his men. "Move out." The cavalry rode off, but Hank knew they weren't gone for good. They'd be back, and next time they wouldn't ask so nice. Hank stepped inside, shutting the door tight. Elara was awake now, watching him with wide, fearful eyes. He knelt beside her. "Soldiers are sniffing around," he said softly. "They'll kill you if they find you. Hell, they'll kill me too." The girl's lips trembled, but she whispered one word, broken and weak. "Father." The night was long and restless. Hank sat by the fire, his Winchester resting across his knees. Every creak of the cabin, every snap of wood in the flames made his nerves hum like barbed wire. Elara stirred on the cot, fever sweat shining on her brow. Hank poured a little whiskey onto a rag and dabbed at her wound. "You're hanging on, kid," he muttered. "You're tougher than most grown men I know." She blinked at him, lips moving as if trying to speak. Her English was broken, barely a whisper. "Father, Ironhawk, they come." Hank froze. Ironhawk. He'd heard the name whispered in every saloon from Tombstone to Tucson. Outside, Dusty snorted and pawed the ground. Hank rose, stepping onto the porch, the boards groaning under his boots. The desert was dark, silent, too silent. Then it came, a low, distant sound. Boom, boom, boom. Drums. Apache war drums, the kind that send a shiver down a man's spine. They were far off, maybe 3 or 4 miles, but they were coming closer. Hank cursed under his breath. He was stuck between 2 storms now. The Army would be back with questions, and the Apache would be coming for their chief's daughter. He went back inside, checking his rifle and reloading the Colt. Elara was watching him, her dark eyes sharp despite the fever. She pointed at his gun, shaking her head slowly. "No shoot," she whispered. "Father, talk, not kill you." Hank let out a dry laugh. "Sweetheart, talkin' is real low on the list of things folks do out here." He sat on the edge of the table, rubbing his jaw.
"You think your old man's gonna shake my hand and say thank you?" She hesitated, then touched her necklace, the silver eagle pendant. "Chief, Ironhawk, he know honor," she said in halting English. "Save me, he see you good man." Hank stared at her, then sighed. "I sure hope you're right, kid, 'cause if I'm wrong, we'll both be buzzard food by dawn." The drums grew louder. Hank stepped outside again, scanning the horizon. This time, he saw it. Torchlight, flickering, dancing like fireflies in the distance. They were on the move, fast. He whistled softly to Dusty, who trotted closer. "Easy, boy," Hank said, patting the horse's neck. "Looks like we might be riding hard before this night's over." Inside, he started packing what little he had. Ammo, jerky, a canteen of water. If it came down to it, they'd have to run. Staying here was suicide. Elara tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Hank helped her, propping her up against the wall. "You can ride?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "Yes, ride, must go, before—" She didn't finish the sentence. Suddenly, Dusty let out a sharp whinny. Hank froze. Then came another sound, different this time. Not drums, not Apache. Hoofbeats. He stepped to the window, peering into the dark. On the far ridge, he saw a line of shadows. Lantern light glinted off something metallic. Rifles. "Damn it," Hank growled. "They're back." 2 fires, 2 storms. One rancher caught dead in the middle. He grabbed his rifle and looked at Elara. "You stay down. Don't make a sound," he said. "If the cavalry finds you before your people do, it's all over." The girl stared back, fear etched into her face. But there was something else there, too. Trust. The hoofbeats faded into the distance, but Hank knew they weren't gone. The cavalry was circling, looking for an excuse. And sooner or later, they'd find one. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. Elara sat upright now, propped against the wall. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a quiet fire. Hank poured her a tin cup of water. "Drink," he said. "You're gonna need your strength." She took a sip, trembling slightly. Then, almost out of nowhere, she said, "They kill my mother." Hank froze mid-step. "What did you say?" She struggled with the words, piecing them together like broken glass. "Soldiers, they come, no warning, shoot, burn." Her voice cracked, and for a moment Hank saw the shadow of a scared child beneath her strong gaze. "They take me. I run. I see too much." Hank leaned against the table, his jaw tight. "You mean to tell me," he said slowly, "those soldiers aren't just chasing you? They're trying to keep you quiet." Elara nodded, clutching the silver eagle pendant around her neck. "Father, Ironhawk, he will come. He think I dead. If he know truth—" She trailed off, but Hank didn't need her to finish. If Ironhawk found out what the soldiers did, the desert would run red with blood. Hank sighed, dragging a hand down his weathered face. "Well, ain't this just peachy?" he muttered. He glanced at the window. The moon was high now, lighting up the yard. Every shadow felt like a pair of eyes. He turned back to her. "Why'd they take you, kid? What the hell did you see?" Ilara's lips trembled. "They kill my uncle, burn our camp, say we steal cattle. Not true." Her voice hardened. "They shoot women, children. I see officer. He laugh. He—" She broke off, tears filling her eyes. Hank felt something twist inside his chest. He'd seen it all before. Men hiding behind flags, calling it justice while spilling innocent blood. He hated the army for that.
hated himself for once being part of it. Elara looked at him, desperation in her eyes. "You believe me?" she whispered. Hank crouched down so they were eye level. "Kid," he said, his voice low and steady, "I don't know much these days, but I can tell when someone's telling the truth, and I believe you." She let out a shaky breath, as if she'd been holding it for days. Then she reached for his hand. "Help me find Father." Hank hesitated. Leaving the ranch meant walking into a war. But keeping her here? If the cavalry found her, they'd both end up in shallow graves. The sound of drums came again, louder now, closer. The Apache war party was moving fast. Dusty whinnied outside. Hank stood, grabbing his rifle. "We ain't got much time, kid," he said. "Your people are on one side, the cavalry's on the other, and I'm stuck in the middle of this damn mess." She met his gaze, her voice firm despite the fear. "You save me. My father, he save you." Hank almost laughed. "Save me? Girl, I don't think I've been savable for a long time." But deep down, something in him shifted. Maybe this was his shot to make things right. He started packing supplies, ammo, jerky, the canteen. "Get some rest while you can," he said. "By the looks of it, tomorrow's gonna be a hell of a day." Dawn broke like fire on the desert horizon. The sky bled orange and gold, painting the dust and scrub brush in harsh light. Hank Lawson stood on his porch, rifle in hand, staring at the ridgeline. He knew they'd come, and now they were here. The rumble of hooves echoed across the flatlands. A line of cavalrymen rode in, dust trailing behind them like a warning. Captain Willard led the pack, his blue coat gleaming in the morning sun, face set like stone. Hank's jaw tightened. "Hell of a way to start the day," he muttered. Inside the cabin, Elara stirred at the sound, panic flashing in her eyes. The soldiers reined up in front of the ranch. Willard dismounted, boots hitting the ground with a thud. "Lawson," he barked, "step aside. We know you've got her." Hank leaned on his rifle, calm but steady. "Don't know what you're talking about, Captain." He spat in the dirt.
"Just me and my horse out here. You boys looking for trouble?" Willard's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb. We tracked her blood trail straight to this ranch. That Apache girl is property of the United States Army." Hank's blood boiled, he said, voice low and sharp. "She ain't property," he said, voice low and sharp. "She's a human being, and I ain't about to hand her over to a pack of killers." The captain's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, Lawson. You're harboring the enemy. That makes you no better than them." Hank's finger brushed the trigger of his Winchester. "You step one boot closer to that door, Captain, and I swear to God I'll put you in the dirt." The tension cracked like a whip. The soldiers raised their rifles. Dusty, tied to the post, snorted and stamped nervously. The air felt like a storm ready to break. Inside, Elara struggled to sit up, hearing the voices. She called out weakly, "No, no fight!" But Hank didn't back down. "Listen, Willard," Hank said, his voice cold as steel. "You want to start a war? Fine. But you're not taking her. Not while I'm breathing." The captain tilted his head, a cruel smile curling his lips. "Lawson, you really want to die for a savage girl?" "For them Apaches who been killing settlers?" Hank's grip tightened on the rifle. "Maybe I'd rather die doing something right for once." His voice was steady, but inside his heart pounded like a drum. He wasn't sure if this was courage or just plain madness. Willard raised his hand, signaling his men. "Last chance, Lawson. Hand her over, or we take her by force." Hank didn't move. The silence stretched. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then a sound rolled over the hills, a new rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Apache war drums. The soldiers shifted nervously. Willard's face went pale. "They're close," one of the troopers muttered. Hank smirked just slightly. "Looks like you ain't the only ones knocking on my door, Captain." The captain cursed. "We'll be back, Lawson," he growled, mounting his horse. "And next time, we won't be asking." The cavalry wheeled around, galloping off into the rising sun, leaving Hank standing alone in the dust. He lowered his rifle slowly, exhaling hard. Inside, Elara was watching him with wide, scared eyes. "They come again?" she asked softly. Hank nodded. "Yeah, and they won't come alone." "You, me, we got one hell of a day ahead of us, kid." The sun was barely up when Hank heard the first whistle. Not the wind, not birds. This was sharp, purposeful, a signal. Dusty's ears shot up. The horse pawed the ground, snorting like he could smell danger coming. Hank's stomach tightened. "They're here," he muttered. He grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. The desert was quiet, too quiet. Then he saw them. Shadows moved along the ridge. A line of riders, fast and silent, like ghosts cut from the dawn mist. Painted faces, long hair, spears and rifles glinting in the sun. Apache. They came in quick, forming a half circle around the ranch. 30 riders, maybe more, each one watching Hank with the cold patience of a wolf pack. And, at their center, Ironhawk. Hank knew it was him the moment he saw him. Broad shoulders, proud posture, feathers tied in his black hair. His face was stern, carved from stone, but his eyes burned with something fierce. Fear, anger, and a father's pain. Ironhawk dismounted with slow, deliberate steps. The others stayed mounted, weapons ready. Hank's grip tightened on his rifle. One wrong move, and this place would turn into a bloodbath. From inside the cabin, Elara's weak voice called out, "Father!" Ironhawk's head snapped up. His eyes locked on the doorway. For a heartbeat, all the fury in his face melted into something else, relief. He barked an order in Apache, and 2 riders stepped forward, but Hank raised a hand. "Easy," Hank said, his voice steady but hard. "She's safe. I kept her alive all night. But you come rushing in here with 30 guns pointed my way, and we're gonna have a problem." Ironhawk stopped, his gaze narrowing. "You, white man," he said, his English rough but clear. "You take my daughter?" "Take her?" Hank spat. "No. She was dying in the creek. I saved her. That's all." The war chief stared at him, silent. The riders shifted, waiting for a sign from their leader. Hank could feel the tension stretching like a wire about to snap. Elara appeared in the doorway, limping but standing. She raised a hand. "Father," she said softly. Her voice cracked, but the word carried like a shot through the standoff. Ironhawk stepped closer. He looked at her bandaged leg, the blood-stained cloth, then back at Hank. His eyes softened just a fraction. "She lives because of you?" Ironhawk asked. Hank nodded. "Yeah, but the army's been sniffing around. They want her dead. You and me both got a problem now." Ironhawk's jaw tightened. "They kill my people," he said, his voice low, raw. "They take my daughter. They think we weak. They will learn." His hand rested on the handle of a tomahawk, but it wasn't pointed at Hank. It was pointed toward the horizon where the cavalry had gone. "I ain't your enemy, Chief," Hank said. "Hell, I'm the only reason she's still breathing. You can shoot me if you want, but it won't bring her back if they come again." For a moment, the air was thick with silence.
Then, slowly, Iron Hawk nodded. He barked a new command, and the warriors lowered their weapons slightly. Elara stepped forward, reaching for her father. He took her hand gently, like she was made of glass. Then he looked at Hank. "You are not like the others," Iron Hawk said. "But this fight is coming, soon. You ready for it?" Hank's gaze was cold but steady. "Chief, I've been ready for a fight my whole damn life." The Apache warriors spread out around the ranch, their horses restless, snorting in the dry morning air. Iron Hawk stood like a statue, eyes locked on Hank, sizing him up as if he could see every scar and secret. "You saved her," Iron Hawk said slowly, voice deep like rolling thunder. "But why? White men do not risk life for Apache." Hank rested his Winchester against the porch post, hands open at his sides. "Maybe I ain't like the other white men you've met," he said. "Maybe I just couldn't watch a kid bleed out. No man with a soul could." Iron Hawk studied him for a long moment. His warriors muttered in their language, pointing at Hank, some nodding, some scowling. One young warrior, face painted black and red, rode forward and spat in the dirt. He barked something sharp at Hank, voice filled with hate. "What's his problem?" Hank asked, not taking his eyes off Iron Hawk. The chief's face hardened. "He says your kind burned his brother's home. He says we should spill your blood." Hank didn't flinch. "Tell him he ain't the first to want me dead," he said. "But you and I both know killin' me won't fix a damn thing." Elara stepped between them, limping, her hand on her father's arm. "Father," she said in a soft but firm voice, "he saved me. He fought death for me. I trust him." Iron Hawk's jaw tightened. He looked at his daughter, then back at Hank. "Trust is not given easy," the chief said, "and war is close. Soldiers will come, many soldiers. They will come for her, for all of us." Hank nodded. "I know. They were here this morning, sniffing around. Won't be long before they come back with more guns." He glanced at the line of Apache warriors, each one ready to fight at a moment's notice. "You think you can take on the U.S. cavalry with just bows and old rifles?" Iron Hawk's eyes flared. "We fight. We always fight. Better to die free than live as cattle." Hank sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. He wasn't about to argue with a man who had nothing left to lose. But something about the chief's words hit him deep. Better to die free. That's what his brother had said when they rode into the Civil War. His brother never rode out. Hank stared at the horizon, where a thin line of dust was already rising. He could feel it in his bones. The soldiers were coming. Inside the cabin, Hank grabbed his pack and started tossing ammo and supplies into it. Elara watched him quietly, her dark eyes sharp. "You run?" she asked. Hank shook his head. "No, I'm getting ready to stand my ground. But I need to know, are you ready for what's coming?" She hesitated, then nodded. "My father fight. I fight." Iron Hawk appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "You stay with us, white man," he asked. "You fight with Apache?" Hank looked at him for a long moment. "I don't fight for Apache," he said. "I fight for what's right. And right now, that means keeping that girl alive." Iron Hawk gave a slow nod. A hint of respect flickered in his eyes. "Then we fight together," he said. "But trust must be earned in blood." The drums started again, far in the distance. The cavalry was moving, fast. Hank's heart pounded, but his voice stayed steady. "Well, Chief," he muttered, loading his Winchester, "looks like we're about to earn a whole lot of trust." The desert wind shifted, carrying with it the sound of trouble. Hooves pounding hard, metal rattling, and the sharp bark of orders shouted in the distance. The cavalry was coming back, and this time they weren't coming for a chat. Hank Lawson stood on his porch, Winchester in hand, eyes squinting against the rising sun.
Across the yard, Ironhawk and his warriors were already mounted, faces painted, weapons ready. The tension between the two groups was thick as wet clay. One wrong move, and the dirt would run red.
"Looks like they brought the whole damn regiment," Hank muttered.
Through the heat haze, he could see them. A dozen riders, led by Captain Willard, riding fast and mean. Their sabers gleamed in the morning light, rifles slung across their backs. Ironhawk rode up beside Hank, his voice low but fierce. "These men bring war. We end it here." His warriors let out sharp cries, echoing across the plain. The sound made Dusty stomp and snort nervously. "Hold on," Hank said, raising a hand. "You think you can outgun them head-on? They've got repeaters and six-shooters. You'll get cut down before you blink." Ironhawk's dark eyes burned. "Then we take them from the shadows. We are hunters. They will fear the trees." Hank smirked, shaking his head. "Trees? Out here? Closest thing to a tree is a cactus, Chief." He racked the lever on his Winchester. "But hell, I like the way you think." The cavalry slowed as they approached the ranch, forming a line just outside rifle range.
Captain Willard's voice rang out. "Lawson, last chance! Hand over the Apache girl, or we'll burn this place to the ground!" Hank stepped forward, voice like a whip crack. "You want her? Come get her, but you better be ready to dig a lot of graves." The captain's face darkened. "Men, prepare to fire!" The soldiers raised their rifles. In the corner of his eye, Hank saw the Apache warriors melting into the desert brush, moving like shadows. He understood Ironhawk's plan now. They'd strike the soldiers from the flanks, fast and hard. Inside the cabin, Elara clutched the edge of the window, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. "Hank, no fight," she whispered. "They kill you. They kill my father." Hank glanced at her, voice steady. "Kid, I ain't looking for a fight, but sometimes the fight finds you." He checked the load in his rifle one last time. "Stay low. Don't open that door unless I'm standing right there." Suddenly, a shot rang out. Not from Hank, not from the soldiers. It was one of Ironhawk's men, firing from the brush, a warning shot. The cavalry jerked in surprise. Willard cursed and shouted, "They're hiding in the rocks! Open fire!" The soldiers raised their rifles, and the air exploded with gunfire. Hank dove behind the porch post as bullets ripped into the wooden walls of the cabin. Dusty screamed and reared back, snapping the post rope. The Apache warriors answered with their own volley, arrows and bullets cutting through the air. "Damn it," Hank muttered. He sprinted back inside, ducking as a round smashed through the window. "Kid, we gotta move." Elara's eyes were wide, but she nodded. Outside, Ironhawk's war cry cut through the chaos like a knife. The real fight had begun, and the ranch was the battleground. Bullets tore through the morning air, splintering the wood of Hank's porch. Smoke and dust curled upward like the desert itself was on fire. The ranch had become a war zone, and there was no turning back. As Hank loaded another round into his Winchester, one thought burned in his mind. This was no longer about survival. It was about who would still be standing when the smoke cleared. The cavalry charged, kicking up a storm of dust. Gunfire cracked from both sides, sharp and relentless. Ironhawk's warriors darted in and out of the rocks, moving fast and silent.
their arrows whistling through the air. One soldier tumbled from his saddle, clutching his side, while another's horse bolted into the open desert. Hank fired from behind a wagon, the Winchester bucking against his shoulder. "Come on, you sons of bitches," he shouted, his voice raw. A bullet whizzed past his head, close enough to sting his cheek. He ducked, heart pounding, and slammed another round into the chamber. Inside the cabin, Elara crouched under the window, clutching the silver eagle pendant on her chest. Every shot made her flinch, but her eyes burned with something fierce, the same fire Hank saw in Ironhawk's eyes when the chief shouted orders to his men. "Stay down, kid," Hank yelled through the doorway. He didn't look back, couldn't. If he did, fear might freeze him, and that wasn't an option. Captain Willard barked commands, waving his saber as his men formed a loose line. "Push forward! Pin 'em down!" The soldiers fired in volleys, tearing through the fence posts, the barn, and anything that offered cover. Hank rolled to a new position, squeezing off 2 shots that sent one trooper tumbling backward. He cursed under his breath. They had too many men, too many rifles, and no sign of them backing off. Ironhawk rode past, ducking low as bullets zipped overhead. "Hank Lawson," he called out, "we hold here or we die here." Hank gritted his teeth. "Fine by me," he shouted back. "Just tell your boys not to shoot the guy with the hat." Then came a sound that froze everyone for half a second, the sharp creak of burning wood. The barn had caught fire. A stray round had hit an oil can, and flames were already licking up the dry boards. "Damn it all," Hank growled, firing one last shot before sprinting to the barn. He threw the doors open, letting out a terrified mule that bolted into the chaos. The fire roared, feeding on the desert wind, black smoke coiling upward like a signal flag for death. Captain Willard grinned from his saddle. "Burn him out, boys," he shouted. "Lawson's got nowhere to run." But Hank wasn't thinking about running. He ducked behind the barn, sweat streaking through the dust on his face, and looked at Ironhawk. "Chief," he yelled, "we need to end this, fast, or we're all dead." The barn burned hot and fast, flames snapping like angry whips in the wind. The air reeked of smoke, gunpowder, and blood. Hank Lawson crouched behind the wagon, sweat rolling down his neck, every muscle tight as a drawn bow. He'd been through battles before, but this felt different, closer, meaner. If they didn't break the cavalry's line soon, they were all done for. Ironhawk slid in beside him, breathing hard, his war paint streaked with dust. "Too many soldiers," the chief said. "They push again soon. We lose this place." Hank wiped the soot from his face. "Then we make our stand now," he growled. His eyes darted to the burning barn, then back to the soldiers advancing across the yard. A plan started to form, half crazy, but better than waiting to die. "You got any spare powder?" Hank asked. Ironhawk's gaze sharpened. "What you thinkin', white man?" "Blow the damn barn before they can use it for cover," Hank said. "Scare the hell out of them. Might just give us a window." The chief hesitated, then nodded once. "You have fire," he said. "Apache make fire speak loud." Hank grinned grimly. "Yeah, let's make it talk." He sprinted across the open yard, bullets snapping at his boots. "Cover me!" he shouted. Ironhawk's warriors fired a wild volley, arrows and bullets whistling past Hank as he dove into the burning barn. The heat was brutal, flames licking at the roof beams. He grabbed 2 barrels of powder, teeth clenched against the smoke choking his lungs. "Come on, Lawson," he muttered. "Do something stupid, just like always." Outside, Captain Willard saw movement. "Lawson's in the barn," he yelled. "Bring him out dead or alive." 2 troopers charged forward, rifles ready. Hank hurled 1 barrel of powder toward the doorway, raised his rifle, and fired. The explosion shook the ground, throwing both soldiers back like rag dolls. The barn's side wall blew out, flames roaring higher, smoke turning the sky black. The cavalry line faltered, horses reared, spooked by the blast. Willard cursed, trying to rally his men, but the moment of chaos was all Hank needed. "Now!" Hank roared. Iron Hawk's warriors surged forward from the rocks, yelling their war cries. The sudden push hit the cavalry hard, forcing them to scatter. Hank ran from the barn, coughing, face streaked with soot. He slammed another round into his Winchester, took aim, and dropped a soldier trying to reload. His shoulder ached from the recoil, but he didn't stop, not now. He ducked back beside Iron Hawk, breathing like he'd run a mile. "Gave him something to think about," Hank said, grinning despite himself. The chief gave him a sharp nod of respect. "You fight with fire in heart," Iron Hawk said. "Apache see this. We fight together." But Hank's grin faded as he looked across the yard. Willard wasn't beaten yet. The captain's face was twisted with fury, his saber flashing as he barked fresh orders. "They're regrouping," Hank said, his voice grim. "And next time, they'll come with everything they've got." Smoke curled in the rising sun, painting the sky a dirty gray. The gunfire had slowed, not because anyone had given up, but because all sides were staring each other down, waiting for someone to make the next move. Hank Lawson stood in the middle of the yard, Winchester in hand, chest heaving. On his left, Iron Hawk and his warriors crouched behind the rocks, silent as coiled snakes. On his right, Captain Willard and what was left of his cavalry formed a ragged line, rifles raised. The air between them crackled like lightning before a storm. "Lawson!" Willard shouted, his voice raw from the smoke. "You've got one chance to step aside. Hand over that Apache girl and walk away. This is your last warning." Hank spat in the dirt. "Last warning? Cap'n, I'm fresh out of listening." His voice carried, low and steady. "You want her, you'll have to walk through me and about 30 pissed-off Apache warriors." Iron Hawk stepped out from cover, his tomahawk glinting in the light. "You kill my people," he said, his words broken but sharp. "You take my daughter. Now you pay." Willard's face twisted with anger. "You think I'm scared of a bunch of savages?" he barked. "We're the law out here. You're nothing but thieves and killers." Hank cut him off. "Funny," he said, leveling his rifle. "Far as I can tell, the only killers I've seen today are wearing blue coats." The wind picked up, whistling through the broken fence. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Elara stood in the doorway of the cabin, leaning on the frame, her bandaged leg trembling. "Father," she called, voice shaking. "Stop fight, please." Her voice cracked something in Hank's chest. He looked at Iron Hawk, then at Willard. There was still blood to come, unless someone broke this cycle. Willard took a step forward, raising his saber. "That girl is a witness. She saw things she wasn't supposed to see. That's why she has to die." His words rang out like a death sentence. Hank's eyes narrowed. "You just said the quiet part out loud, Captain." He shifted his stance, finger brushing the trigger. "Now every man here knows exactly what you are." Iron Hawk's gaze snapped to Willard. The chief's eyes burned with fury, a father's rage. He raised his hand, signaling his men. "We end this, now." "Don't do this," Hank warned, his voice sharp. "Once the shooting starts again, none of us are walking out clean." Willard sneered. "Then you'll die on the wrong side of history, Lawson." He raised his arm. "Fire!" The yard erupted in chaos. Rifles cracked, arrows whistled through the air.
The battle had begun again, fiercer than ever. The gunfire roared like thunder. Hank dove behind the smoking remains of the wagon, bullets chewing through the wood. Ironhawk's warriors charged from the flanks, arrows streaking through the dust, cutting down 2 soldiers before they could reload. Hank peeked over the wagon, spotted a soldier lining up on Elara's cabin window. He fired 1 clean shot. The trooper dropped. "Not today," Hank muttered, teeth clenched. Captain Willard was still on his horse, swinging his saber like some damn war hero from a dime novel. "Push forward," he bellowed. But the chaos was swallowing his men whole. 2 troopers were down, and a 3rd was pinned under his dead horse, screaming. Hank knew if he didn't stop Willard, this fight wouldn't end. So he ran. He sprinted across open ground, sliding behind a low fence post just as Willard turned toward him. The captain's eyes locked on Hank with pure hate. "Lawson," he snarled, "you picked the wrong side, boy." Hank's blood boiled. He'd heard that tone before, men who thought they were better just because they wore a uniform. "Wrong side?" Hank shouted. "I'm standing on the side that ain't shooting women and kids." Willard spurred his horse, charging straight at Hank. The saber flashed, slicing air inches from Hank's head. Hank rolled, firing a shot that shattered Willard's saddle horn. The horse reared, throwing Willard hard into the dirt. The captain came up quick, dust and blood on his face, pistol drawn. He fired. Hank felt the round buzz past his ear. "Damn fool," Hank muttered, slamming the lever on his Winchester. Before he could fire again, Willard tackled him. They went down hard, rolling in the dirt, fists and elbows flying. The rifle skidded out of reach. Hank caught a punch to the jaw, his vision flashing white. He answered with a headbutt that left them both bleeding. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Willard spat, pinning Hank's arm. "You'll hang for this, Lawson, you and that filthy savage girl." Hank roared, twisting free. He drove his fist into Willard's ribs, once, twice, until the captain coughed and staggered back. Hank grabbed a broken fence post, swinging it like a club. The wood cracked against Willard's pistol, sending it flying. "Hero," Hank snarled, standing over him. "No, I'm just a man trying to make it right." Willard lunged with a knife pulled from his boot. Hank barely dodged, the blade slicing his sleeve. They grappled, grunting, each man fighting with raw, desperate rage. Finally, Hank slammed Willard's hand against the ground, the knife dropping with a clatter. "End of the line, Captain," Hank said, panting, pressing the broken post to Willard's throat. "You walk away now, or I put you under 6 feet of desert sand." Before Willard could answer, a sharp whistle rang out. Ironhawk appeared behind them, tomahawk raised. "Move, Lawson," the chief said coldly. "This man's blood belongs to me." Hank hesitated, chest heaving. One wrong call, and this standoff would turn into a killing. Hank froze, the broken fence post still pressing against Willard's throat. Ironhawk stood a few feet away, tomahawk raised, eyes burning like coals in the desert wind. The chief's warriors gathered behind him, silent but ready, their arrows trained on the defeated cavalrymen. "Move, Lawson," Ironhawk said again, voice sharp as a blade. "This man kills my family. I take his life now." Hank's grip tightened on the post. "Yeah, he deserves it," Hank said, glaring down at Willard. "But killing him right here, that's just fuel for more fire." "You think the army's gonna walk away if their captain doesn't ride back?" Ironhawk's jaw tightened. "They already bring war. His death changes nothing." Willard spat blood, sneering at them both. You're fools. The army will come down on you like a hammer. You'll all hang, every one of you. And Lawson, when they find out you sided with these savages, you'll swing right next to 'em." Hank leaned in, his voice a low growl. "I've heard enough out of you." He knocked Willard's hat off with the post and stared him dead in the eye. "Tell me, Captain, how many women and kids did you kill at that camp? How many?" Willard's face twisted, but he said nothing. That silence told Hank everything he needed to know. Ironhawk took a step closer. "You fight like Apache," the chief said, eyes fixed on Hank. "But I must know, are you with us, or are you just another white man who will run when the fire gets hot?" Hank glanced around. The ranch was half destroyed. The barn was still smoldering. Every bone in his body ached. But when he looked at Elara, standing there with fear and trust in her eyes, he knew there wasn't a choice anymore. "I ain't running," Hank said. "I'll stand with you."
"But if we're gonna win, we gotta be smarter than this. We let Willard live, send him limping back to his bosses. He tells them what he saw here, Apache and a white man fighting together. That'll rattle 'em worse than any bullet." Ironhawk studied Hank for a long moment, like a man weighing the soul of another. Finally, he lowered the tomahawk. "Your words have truth," he said. "But if he comes again, his blood will be yours to spill." Hank nodded. "Fair enough." He grabbed Willard by the collar and hauled him to his feet. The captain's face was pale, sweat running down his temples. "This ain't over, Lawson," Willard hissed. "You just signed your death warrant." "Yeah," Hank said with a bitter grin. "Get in line." The remaining soldiers, battered and shaken, helped their captain back onto a horse. They rode off, leaving behind a yard littered with smoke, broken wood, and blood. Ironhawk turned to Hank. "Now the real war begins," the chief said. "They will return, with more men, more guns." Hank looked out across the desert, where the cavalry's dust trail was already fading. "Then we better be ready," he said.
"'Cause next time, it's all or nothing." The desert was quiet again, but only for a moment. Hank knew that silence. It wasn't peace, just the calm before the next storm. Ironhawk stood beside him, eyes scanning the horizon. "They come back," the chief said, voice heavy but sure. "More soldiers, more guns." "Yeah," Hank replied, rolling a fresh cartridge into his Winchester. "And we can't hold this ranch against 'em, not like this." Ironhawk's warriors gathered in a loose circle, their faces painted, their bows strung tight. They were ready to fight to the last man. But Hank had been in enough battles to know that bravery alone didn't win wars. Strategy did, and they were gonna need a damn good one. Hank pointed toward the burned-out barn. "You see that canyon about half a mile east? Narrow pass, only one way in and out?" Ironhawk nodded. "We use it. We lead them there. Make the ground our ally." The chief's eyes narrowed. "You have a plan?" "Yeah," Hank said. "We rig that canyon with fire and lead. Force them to choke up in the narrow trail, then hit 'em from above. Your boys take the ridges. I'll handle the bait." Ironhawk's brow furrowed.
"You risk your life." Hank gave a rough grin. "Wouldn't be the first time." The next few hours were a blur of movement. The warriors gathered dry brush and oil-soaked rags, hauling them to the canyon walls. Hank dug into his meager stash of dynamite, left over from clearing rocks for his ranch fence, and planted it where the canyon bottlenecked. Elara limped out to watch him work. "You go alone?" she asked softly, worry etched in her voice. "Somebody's got to get their attention," Hank said. He ruffled her hair gently. "Don't worry, kid. I'll be back, if I don't screw it up too bad." She gave him a faint smile, but her eyes stayed sad. "You not bad, man," she whispered. "You good." By late afternoon, dust rose on the horizon. The cavalry was coming, this time with twice as many men. Hank mounted Dusty, the old horse snorting like he understood what was about to happen. "All right, boy," Hank muttered. "Let's give 'em a reason to chase us." He rode out, straight into the open. The soldiers spotted him and gave a shout. "There he is! That's Lawson!" Hank fired one shot into the dirt, just enough to stir them up, then wheeled Dusty around and bolted for the canyon. The soldiers took the bait, charging hard, their horses thundering behind him. At the mouth of the canyon, Hank glanced back. 20 men, maybe more, all packed into that narrow pass. "Perfect," he muttered. He raised his rifle and fired at a powder keg stashed under a ledge. The explosion ripped through the canyon, a wall of fire and rock raining down. Before the soldiers could recover, Ironhawk's warriors opened up from the cliffs, arrows and bullets cutting through the smoke. The cavalry line broke, men shouting, horses panicking. Hank swung down, firing shot after shot, the Winchester kicking hard against his shoulder. For a moment, it looked like they'd turned the tide. But the battle wasn't over. Willard's voice roared above the chaos. "Hold the line! Kill Lawson! Kill them all!" The canyon was silent now, just the crackle of dying fire, the groan of wind through scorched rocks, and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Bodies, both bluecoats and fallen horses, littered the narrow pass. The ground was stained with the price of survival. Hank Lawson sat on a boulder, chest heaving, the Winchester laid across his knees. Blood streaked his temple. He didn't know if it was his or someone else's. Dusty stood nearby, sides lathered with sweat, but still alive, still loyal. Ironhawk walked the battlefield with his warriors, silent as shadows. They moved among the fallen, collecting arrows, finishing off wounded horses with swift, merciful strikes. The chief stopped beside Hank, looking down at him with an expression halfway between respect and sorrow. "You fight like a wolf," Ironhawk said quietly, "but wolves don't belong alone." Hank gave a tired half-smile. "Never was good at belongin'," he said, wiping the grime from his face. "Guess I just did what had to be done." Elara limped toward them, her face pale but her eyes steady. She knelt by Hank, pressing a strip of cloth to his forehead. "You not alone," she said softly. "You saved me, saved my father." Hank met her gaze, and for a moment he saw Lucy again, his little girl, smiling from a memory that hurt but didn't sting quite as much now. Maybe saving Elara had healed more than just a wound in the world. Maybe it had healed something in him, too. The Apache warriors began gathering to leave, loading what little they carried onto their horses. Ironhawk turned to Hank. "You have place with us," the chief said, holding out a hand. "No white man is our brother, but you saved what is most precious. You are brother now." Hank hesitated, looking back toward the wreckage of his ranch. The barn was gone. The fences were ruined. The life he'd built, piece by piece, was nothing but ashes. But maybe that wasn't where his story ended. "Yeah," Hank said finally, shaking Ironhawk's hand. "Maybe I've been riding the wrong trail all these years." 2 days after the battle, the desert felt different. The wind still whispered through the canyon walls, but now it carried the sound of life. Horses snorting, voices speaking in the Apache tongue, the soft rhythm of campfires being built. Hank Lawson rode alongside Ironhawk's band as they left the ruins of his ranch behind. He didn't look back. What was left there? Just ashes and ghosts. For the first time in years, he felt like he was riding toward something, not just away from it. The Apache camp was hidden in a wide valley ringed by red cliffs. Teepees stood in neat circles, and smoke curled from cooking fires that gave off the rich smell of roasted corn and game.
Children ran barefoot, laughing, weaving between horses and wagons. It was a living, breathing world, a world Hank hadn't known he needed. When they arrived, women and elders gathered around Elara, their voices rising in relief and joy. Iron Hawk stood tall, his arm around his daughter, pride softening his usually hard face. He turned to Hank. "You give me back my heart," the chief said. "For this you are welcome in my fire circle." That night, Hank sat by a roaring campfire. The stars spread thick across the desert sky. Elara sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, her wounded leg healing, her face calm. She leaned against him slightly, like she trusted him with more than just her life. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Iron Hawk's voice broke the quiet. "White man who fights for right, not for gold or power, is rare," he said. "Your people call you outlaw. We call you brother." Hank stared into the flames. He'd spent years trying to forget the war, the family he'd lost, the ranch that never felt like home. But here, surrounded by people who'd once been called his enemies, he felt something he hadn't in years: belonging. Elara smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You stay with us?" she asked softly. Hank took a slow breath, watching the sparks float into the dark. "Yeah, kid," he said, his voice low but certain. "I reckon I will, long as you'll have me." The desert night was quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels alive. The stars stretched across the sky like an endless trail, each one glowing like a campfire from some forgotten time. Hank Lawson sat by the fire, his hat tilted back, staring up at that endless sky. He'd fought, bled, and nearly died in this unforgiving land. But for the first time in years, he felt at peace. The Apache camp was behind him, the sound of laughter and drums drifting on the cool wind. Elara was safe, her voice soft as she sang an old tribal song with her people. Hank took a deep breath. He thought about Lucy, his little girl, and his wife, Mary. He knew they were gone, but maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud of what he'd done. He'd found a family again, even if it wasn't the one he'd expected. In this wild, raw land, family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people you'd fight and die for. As the fire crackled, Iron Hawk joined him, sitting silently for a moment before speaking. "Desert remembers men like you," the chief said, "not because you fight, because you choose what is right." Hank gave a small nod, his voice low. "Funny thing about this place, it'll chew a man up if he's got nothing to hold on to. But when you do find something, someone worth fighting for, it makes all the scars worth it." The night carried that moment, as if the desert itself was listening. It was a story born from fire, dust, and the stubborn will to survive. Stories like these weren't just about guns or battles. They were about people, about heart. And Hank knew this land would always have a way of testing a man's soul. If you felt this story deep in your chest, if it made you see the true grit and quiet heart of the frontier, stick around. This is just one of many true Wild West stories. Tales of courage, redemption, and the kind of bonds that can't be broken by time or blood. Click to watch another story of the Wild West, where kindness, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of the frontier still ride with us. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe and ride with us on the next trail.